Welcome to Still Unbelievable, a podcast by Reason Press, where we examine religious claims, especially those made by Christians, and we regularly respond to items that are featured on the podcast Unbelievable. We embrace dialogue, but as skeptical former believers, we will also criticise unfounded claims and unsupported beliefs. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Still Unbelievable. This one a little bit different to the previous ones that we've had that you may have listened to recently. This is going to be a chat, a conversation, a couple of people we've got on who will probably be new to all of you listeners. In fact, I fully anticipate that'll be new, although there's a possibility of a blog that you may or may not have read. Hopefully you have. But before we get on to that, a quick bit of updates on what's been going on. Firstly, the last episode that I uploaded, the solo episode that I did on my own, commenting on a couple of commentaries on coronavirus, I've had some wonderful, lovely feedback from several listeners. Thank you so much for that. I think of all the episodes that we've had, that's been the one which has had the most feedback on. So thank you guys. You know who you are. I genuinely appreciate the feedback. Thank you so much. And I'm going to take that, the compliments that I've had, and hopefully we're going to run with something on that. Also, we had Jonathan McClatchy a couple of episodes ago. We have confirmed that there's going to be a second episode with Jonathan McClatchy, so stand by for that. That's going to be recorded a few days after this is being recorded, but there'll obviously be a longer gap between the uploads. So by the time you've heard this, it will have already been recorded and I'll be straight on to the editing. So too late to send any questions in, I anticipate, but that's the situation with that. I wanted also to talk about something a little bit personal. On our other podcaster, Andrew and I run Proscenium. Earlier in the year, we had the wonderful Alex O'Connor, the Cosmic Skeptic, talking about veganism on Proscenium. I genuinely loved that conversation, probably because of all the episodes that Andrew and I have done over the last couple of years on the podcast. We're approaching 50 episodes, I think, between the two podcast brands together, Andrew. But of all the ones, it's the one I enjoyed the most, and it's because it challenged me the most. It challenged what I take for granted in this world. It challenged what I think is right, and it challenged the values that I put behind how I do things. And as a result of that and the conversations that we had at home, we are making a conscious effort in my household to think more about the consequences of the food that we eat and think more about the ethics behind the production of the food we eat. So I'm not prepared yet at this moment to brand myself with the title vegan, but we're getting very, very close to that in terms of source of food. Certainly processed food has just disappeared from our shopping list completely, and we've pretty much eliminated all meat. In fact, the only meat that we've eaten for the last month is meat that's already been purchased and has been sat in our freezer, and we're thinking about what meat are we happy to buy, and we're actively looking out for vegetarian and vegan dishes to eat and to cook with, to the point where this week, for the first time I can remember, we actually had tofu as part of a meal and I didn't throw up. So that will probably happen again. So that's where my life is. Did that episode challenge you, listeners, as much as it challenged me? Write in, let us know if you think it's just a label that people want to throw around to make them feel better. We'll comment on that as well. And finally, before we just get into the conversation in the chat here, I have in front of me, I'm very, very happy because it's been a long time since I've had this. I have got a bottle of the wonderful, the most beautiful banana bread beer. Now, if you don't know what that is, you are obviously not English. It is a beautiful, beautiful beer, and you have a mouthful of banana flavour every time you swallow. And what's so great about this banana bread beer is it's quite gassy, and about 4 seconds after you've had a good mouthful of banana and you've swallowed, you get that banana flavor right back up again, and it's wonderful. But unfortunately, I've been banished to my office because those who usually sit on the sofa next to me apparently don't appreciate that second wind. But anyway, with that wonderful image in your mind, welcome Andrew back on. I've let you back on after I took over the reins all by myself. How are you, sir?
I'm actually holding an armful of kid. I'm doing well, and I have to say that I thought the COVID-19 episode that you flew solo was one of the best episodes that we've done, if not the best episode that we've done. So
Thank you, but that might mean that I have to drop you on a more regular basis, and maybe our listeners might not like that.
Well, I don't know. The numbers look pretty good. Maybe that's maybe that's what's called
let's
for.
let's not take that too far, because we might end up in a place we don't want to see.
Right. So the truth is that in podcasting, there's a lot of room for doing a lot of shows. And right now, this is maybe the best time to ever do podcasting. People are home. And while the podcast numbers are down a little bit, overall, I think this is the right time to put out content. And so maybe we will do some more solo shows. It doesn't mean that our listeners will ever lack for both of us. But part of the conceit of Proscenium is to branch out and do as many topics as we can do. And there will be times where we don't necessarily have a topic that we're sharing, and we'll do solo shows. What that will mean for the listeners is they will simply have more Proscenium shows. I think that's a good thing. So,
excellent. And with that said, welcome Sam and Dave. Welcome to our show. Thank you so much for sitting through that monologue. Welcome to Still Unbelievable.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah, good to be here as well.
Sam, you and us, I say you and us because it was Andrew and myself who spoke to you. Was it a year ago that we first spoke? It feels like it was quite some time ago that we were first in contact. It was a long time before viruses and stuff like that were on the horizon. It struck my ego, helped me feel really good about myself. Why did you get in contact with us, and what's happened in the time since?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I first reached out to you guys probably about a year ago after reading the book that you both authored with a few other people, Still Unbelievable, which is the response book to Justin Briley's book, Unbelievable, Why After Listening to Atheists for 10 Years I'm Still a Christian. And your response book is basically why after listening to Christian arguments we're still skeptics. And I heard a couple of you guys talking on the Unbelievable podcast, and I heard the book mentioned, and I went into Amazon and just wish listed it for a little bit so that I would come back to it at some point. And after a little while of kind of resting some of the questions and things I was hearing on the Unbelievable podcast and asking some questions about my own religious convictions, I picked it up and started reading it basically, and then found it hit me quite hard. A lot of stuff in there really got me thinking, got me asking some very hard questions. And then just reached out via email to you guys, and you were gracious enough to chat to me over Skype, much like this. So I think that's about a year ago we started talking on Skype, which has been really nice. So thank you for that.
It was great to get that first email from you. I think you were the first person who contacted us in that category. We've had a couple of other contacts, but I think you're the first one that stuck around like this. And it made me realize how much I missed that, because it was 12 years ago when I deconverted, and people were blogging at the time, but I found all the blogs after it was a done deal for me. So that whole process of questioning things, there probably was if I'd looked hard enough, I'll be honest, but I didn't look hard enough, and it wasn't really easy to find. I certainly wasn't listening to podcasts and at that time. So there was less material about for me to grab hold of and to reach out to at that time, and I think it would have been an easier ride for me if I'd had that. David, presumably you know about us because Sam's talked to you.
Yeah, essentially. He has mentioned you quite a lot, and as you said there, your book and your response to The Unbelievable was interesting. So yeah, that's how I know about you.
Could both of you just sketch out for me where you are in terms of a faith position? Are you transitioning?
So with me, I suppose I don't know what I'd label it as. I simply don't know what I think anymore, I think is the best way of describing it. I wouldn't put myself in any camp whatsoever. I am someone who has been a Christian for well over a decade, and now I don't know what I think. I don't know what I believe about most things now, and I don't know if basically I don't have sufficient answers to a lot of my questions. So yeah, I can't label myself. I can't say I'm transitioning or I'm a this or a that, but I can say that I have a whole host of doubts and I'm not sure what the answers are.
Thanks for that honesty. I'm going to come back to that in a moment and let Sam answer the same question.
Yeah, so I label myself as an agnostic atheist these days. So just to kind of phrase that a little bit so people understand what I mean by that, the agnostic side being kind of open to the journey and asking questions and being uncertain about stuff. Like, I don't have all the answers. I'm never going to pretend to have all the answers. I'm not set in stone and stuff. And kind of the agnostic side, the atheist side, not being like a like a hard atheist, which would say like I'm convinced there is no God, but taking a much more nuanced approach, which I think is kind of just saying I'm not convinced there is a God. It's that different outlook where actually I'm looking at the evidence, I'm weighing it all up, and then I'm just not convinced that there is a God, but I'm still happy to look at the evidence. I'm happy to have the conversations. I'm open to talking to people and very much trying to, I call it engaging both sides of the battle line, although it doesn't necessarily have to be a battle, fully aware of that, but at times it can feel a little bit like that with response videos on YouTube and people getting into the nuanced areas of Christianity and atheism. So yeah, I that's how I class myself, an agnostic atheist. Basically, since chatting to you guys and since kind of having a few medical problems and also depression, since about basically 2017, I've been on a slow journey, which kind of sped up in the last 12 months, which ended up resulting in me stepping down from church leadership. So I was involved in church leadership at a small church here in the north of England where I live, and then leaving a Christian job. And yeah, it's a lot has changed because of the steps that I have felt like I had to take because of the realization that I didn't believe what I thought to be the foundation of life. Yeah, I hope that's a nice, succinct response.
It's a genuine concern for individuals, for me, when they have an income stream that's tied to a specific belief, because if that belief shakes, there's a risk to that income stream. And I get a little bit worried about tying too much of a relationship between your welfare and adherence to a certain belief. I get concerned that if people have a situation and a dynamic that has those two things in tension, and that one risks the other, that people could hold on to something falsely. I identify, David, with the bit about what you said about not knowing what to call yourself or not holding a label, because for me, I usually say that my deconversion experience lasted about 3 years, and accepting the point of being atheist came right at the end of that, obviously. And so there was quite a chunk in the middle where I did wonder, what am I? Is it important that I have a label to myself? And I identify with that comment that you made about not applying a label to myself. My feeling on that is that's cool. Don't feel that it's necessary. I don't know if you need me to say that. I think I'd like to ask you, in terms of your Christian faith, where was your Christian faith? Sorry if I'm talking about it in the past tense. And what was the point at which you decided that you were essentially labelless, if that makes sense?
I became a Christian when I was 19, when I was at uni, and I'm now 35. So maths, I said I worked with numbers earlier, didn't I? But mental arithmetic apparently doesn't work for me. So 16 years ago. So I was a Christian then, and I've been a Christian until, well, I suppose technically maybe I still am. I don't know what I am, as I said. It was a couple of years ago when it really started, lots of questions started to come in, and it's in the last 6 months where things have gone from a couple of questions to, I've used the example, it's like having a brick wall built in front of you, and the brick wall is all different views and opinions and facts and figures you have about your life, and lots of those bricks can be knocked out and it makes no difference. It's fine. You lose you change your worldview on something, or you have a new bit of information, and that brick gets knocked out. It's not a problem. Sometimes you knock a brick out and a whole load fall down because it was like a structurally important brick. And what it's felt like is that happened. Like the brick's been knocked out and it's just gone. Sound effects on a podcast, yeah, that always works. It's tumbled down. There we go. And so it's a really interesting situation. So my Christian life was, so I became a Christian at 19 at university, and I'm not sure what universities are like in the US, but in the UK, the Christian unions are often quite active. And so you get you're very much chucked into a very active, involved group of people who it becomes part of your social network. You obviously gain lots of friends, you get to know loads of people, and it becomes very much part of your life in a very active sense. So people go out and do outreach, is what the terminology is used, and try to speak to people about Jesus and take people to church and become very involved in the running of a church, because you're young and available in the sense of you haven't got a family or jobs. You are a student, and most students, if we're honest, do very little. They spend most of the time playing computer games, getting drunk, and doing lots of drugs. So you have a lot of spare time. So my Christian life was very active. However, through that, I've always, whenever I've looked at the church and I've read the Bible, and they never married or mirrored very well. And that always led to me just finding that very odd. and therefore struggling with church, getting annoyed, until the point I stopped reading the Bible for a bit, and then I was fine with church again. So that has been a cycle for many years. And then I realised a couple of years ago, not even a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago, that I started realising that most people I knew who weren't Christians didn't actually really live like the Bible said. Obviously, if you read something like Matthew, so the Beatitudes, etc., the vision of Christianity that's portrayed there is completely selfless, isn't it? It's that if someone asks something, you give it to them. If you have money and someone asks for it, give it away. And you shouldn't worry about anything. You shouldn't be concerned about tomorrow. You should live for the now. So, serve others, sacrifice yourself. And then I looked around at everyone and I was like, oh, nobody actually does this. Everyone's values are just middle class values that fit. Everyone's just nice. Everyone's pleasant. And then so it was at that point I was like, oh, does anybody actually believe this? And then I obviously reflected back to me and went, do I actually believe this? And that sort of question allowed me to answer other questions. When I went, oh, actually, I'm not sure if I do believe this, that sort of opened the door to permission to myself to go, oh, maybe I don't. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It does.
That was, so my background at university is theology and computer science. And
because they go together so well.
I was okay. So I'll just say it again. I was the only guy on campus with that major, with that set of majors. Double majors are rare anyway. To have that combination makes you a pariah in both circles, or at least it did in 1988, which is maybe I'm revealing my age a little too much. But I did have a group of friends. I was part of that whole Christian community. We door knocked on the weekends. We helped small churches. We were kind to fluffy animals. Whatever. We did the whole Christian thing. And that bit that you mentioned, David, about finding a place in your life where you could give yourself permission to ask sort of the external question: do I believe some part of the Christian story? Right? Not how do I believe this part of the story? Is it literal or is it figurative? Or, how do I work this thing like the Garden of Eden into my overall Christian belief system? We could all get away with that until you allow yourself to say, does that story make sense at all? And it doesn't have to be the Garden of Eden story. It can be any part of the Christian story, right? And you say, no matter how I work it in, do I believe it at all? And once that starts, it is hard to control the consequence of asking that first question. The consequences won't always be leaving Christianity. But plenty of people have doubts and find ways to reconcile those doubts. For me, eventually it was not reconcilable. That was my journey out.
Are you both going to the same church? I know you know each other, but I haven't asked if your Christian lives are interwoven to that aspect.
No, we're not. No, we live probably 30 miles apart. So no, we go to different churches more. Well, I don't really go to church more. I'll let Dave speak for himself. But yeah, we're about 30 miles apart, right, Dave?
Yeah, I imagine it's about that. So no, I don't go to church either. I haven't been to an organised church for nearly 2 years.
So what was the big question for you, David? What was the question that started you on the road where you are now?
I think the biggest problem is not so much a question, but it was what I referred to earlier, is that mirroring. I'd always thought of it when I first joined church. I'd been uncomfortable with the lack of mirroring between what the Bible teaches and what the church is. And that has always been the biggest thing. So when the easiest example is when you look at, unfortunately, American pastors, mega pastors with crazy money, and your Stephen Furtricks with huge mansions and whatnot, and
Joel Osteen
and Kenneth Copeland and all those individuals. Rude words. That has always been the biggest bugbear, because again, you just, if you read the Gospels and the New Testament as a whole, I don't understand how anyone can get living in massive affluence from that. If that was your text, if you were on a desert island and you managed to have the New Testament with you, I don't understand how anyone's brain can go to those people we just talked about. And so I think that's always been the biggest problem. Not just them, because they're just individuals, like those mega pastors, even all of them together, you only got a few hundred, haven't you? But it's the fact that everyone wants to be them, and they like venerate these people as amazing teachers. And I mean, they are great orators, but they venerate them as these amazing examples of Christianity. And I'm like, in reality, they look nothing like Jesus. Like, there's nothing about their lives that screams Jesus at you. So I think that's always been the biggest question. And from that, it's not just the mega wealthy, like jets and mansions and stuff, because it's easy to dismiss that, because again, there's not many of them, and people are people. I think that led to the question of, well, how come the people around me in my direct circle, like, there's nothing different about them to any other people who are middle class? Because I'm very middle class. I'm born and raised in like what's called the home counties in the UK. So Surrey, which is near London, leafy, rich, affluent Surrey. So the desires and the ideals of the people I know who are very similar backgrounds and middle class, their ideals are middle class values. They're not Christian values. So when I would hear people talking about moving house, and the conversation was not, oh, we've prayed and we feel God is calling us to an awful area, like one of the downcast areas of the city, or like the difficult areas to live in, or where the crime is highest, or where there's poverty. People are always just saying, oh, we're looking for areas in where there's a good school, where there's a nice house for money we can afford, all these sort of things. The standard, like, their decisions were not based on anything but normal middle class values. Everyone wanted to live in the house with a lovely garden and have kids who went to a lovely school and have a nice car and a nice job. There was so little decision that seemed to reflect what Jesus spoke about. And so that led to, I was like, hang on, does anybody actually believe this? And I think that's the key, is like, I realized that people didn't actually believe it, because if you really believed what the Bible says, your life would look nothing like the lives of people in church. Because take a simple thing, so money aside, like the concept of hell. Well, I know there's debate about what hell actually is, but stuff like that. There's usually stereotypical traditional hell, which is fire and brimstone and horrible torture. Obviously, no one actually believes in hell, because if you genuinely believed in hell, you would never shut up about hell, would you? Because if you genuinely believe that people who aren't Christians are going to go to that awfulness, you would constantly tell people to avoid it. Because it's like, if someone's about to be hit by a bus, you don't go, oh, will they mind if I take them out of the way? Will they be offended if I prevent them being killed? Like, so it's those sort of things. It's if you actually take a step back, the realization that 90% of the people I knew, their lives didn't show that they actually believed what they said they did.
I agree about hell.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matthew. You got it.
I was actually going to do a very quick plug for the Skeptics and Seekers podcast, which has literally just done a few episodes on hell. And they had Chris Date on one of their episodes talking about hell, and he does a podcast called Rethinking Hell. And over the past week, I've listened to quite a large chunk of his back catalogue on episodes of hell, just to try to get up to speed on what some Christians are saying about hell. So I've probably heard more about hell in the last week, in terms of sermon type content, than I ever did in the entirety of my 30 years as a Christian, in terms of pure hours of listening. And I'm even less motivated to hear about hell now than I was when I was a Christian. But I think you're right, David. If hell really was that place that needed to be feared, then we should be warning people about it. And I don't think I spent a lot of time thinking about hell when I was a Christian. And excuse me, there's that banana bread beer. I don't find hell motivating at all. All the content that I've listened to over the last week or so, none of it I find motivating to take Christianity seriously at all. Is that a statement that the three of you can identify with?
For me, hell has another problem in the Christian worldview. One of the central ideas to most denominations, though certainly not all of them, is that God wants free will worshipers, people that love him and don't count the cost. It very much seems to me that if you want free will worshipers and you don't want them to sin, all you have to do is pull back the curtains and say, here is my holy goodness. This is my heaven. Have a look. And conversely, pull back the curtains on hell and say, here is this horrible, awful place. And now you can freely make the choice. Love me or despise me. Choose heaven or hell. But this whole hiddenness routine, where prayer doesn't work better than chants, and sometimes worse than flipping a coin. And this idea that God is hiding out there, but he wants a free and open, loving relationship. There's no way that that makes sense to me at any level at all. If you really want people to just make a decision about being in a relationship with you, then what we all do, the sensible thing, the normal thing that we do is exercise the relationship, play our cards face up. We say, here's who we are. And we work from that basis. The Christian notion strains back to absolute incredulity, that there's a God out there. He wants a relationship with us. He can give us eternal punishment or eternal reward. But we are to spend our entire time speculating about the nature of the two. It does not make sense to me.
Seems like a weird one to me. I've just finished reading Bart Ehrman's new book, Heaven and Hell.
That's an awesome book.
Yeah, it's a really, really good book. And in that book, something that came to light for me, and it would do for any reader, I'm sure, is how things have been developed, how we read the Bible with this kind of authoritative stamp on it, which people tell us, this is the definitive word of God. It is complete, it is whole, it is true, it is all these things. And actually, when you actually read the damn thing, you see there's so much changes. I'm just going to read a quick quote, if that's okay.
Please.
So, yeah, this is from Bart Ehrman's new book, Heaven and Hell. As it turns out, it is possible to trace a trajectory in our surviving Gospels away from the deeply apocalyptic teaching of Jesus in Mark and Matthew, to the less apocalyptic teachings in the later Gospel, Luke, to non-apocalyptic teachings in the still later Gospel of John, to anti-apocalyptic teachings in the non-canonical Gospel of Thomas, written a couple of decades after John. In short, the words of Jesus over time came to be de-apocalypsized. Now, apocalyptic essentially just means it's describing or prophesying the complete destruction of the world. And this is something that Bart does really well in this book, is this move from the words of Jesus, which you can interpret very much to be talking about annihilation, about the destruction of people. Like Jesus talking about the kingdom of God arriving and God arriving with that, and people who aren't in the kingdom of God being essentially destroyed, cast out to Gehenna, which is where you'd burn your trash and you'd cast it away and it would be essentially destroyed there. And then we see the Gospels, as Bart Ehrman just said, move these things on, and it carries on even after our canonical Gospels into later and later and later writings where things became so much more about accepting these liturgies and these traditions that you would get into a certain place and you'd save yourself from going to another place. And I notice it in so many people that I talk to. I'm chatting about kind of the fact that I don't believe in this stuff anymore, that I don't believe that the God that I worship is a real God. I believe it's something that I have been told is real and then hoped was real and therefore lived my life by. But actually, the fact that I now don't believe that, people are saying to me, well, aren't you worried about going to hell, about judgment and about sin and about the need to actually have a place where we reconcile the issues that come up in life? And this is what Bart Ehrman's book does really well. And I'll just say as one last thing and finish it. It traces from the beginning of the Bible all the way through to the end, and then even looking before, at the civilization of the time, so the Greco-Roman civilization and the Greeks before that, and the Persians, and looking at how over time humanity has philosophized and asked questions about justice and judgment and redemption and purpose and meaning and morality, and they have put these things into these things we now call heaven and hell, where we know or hope that when someone dies, they will eventually go to a hell, or they'll go to a hell straight away, or there's a purgatory, or there's things that we've added and there's doctrines that we've changed and put in because we want to answer people's problems now with a future hope or destruction. Does that make sense? I find that fascinating.
Yes, it does. Thank you. I want to move on to the projects that you two are doing. So I know from our very earliest conversation, Sam, you were talking about what you wanted to do next and to do some of your own writing and to produce some of your own content. So I know you've been working on that over the last, possibly even before you and I first spoke. You might need to correct me on that. And I think this is probably a good point to move into that. And I'd just like to say before you say that, I do follow you on Twitter. and you very regularly post up where you are in terms of books that you're reading and thoughts on some of your books, etc. And you read an awful lot more than I do, and you seem to go through books at a far quicker rate than I ever could. I think some of us are just blessed with different reading speeds. So I appreciate certainly that part of what you do, but that's not all that you do. So can you just fill out what it is that you're doing in terms of social media content and what you and Dave are working together on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, basically in 2017, I realized that I was on the beginning of a journey when I started questioning stuff in a fundamental way. And at that point, I turned to my wife and just said, "Hey, look, Kirsty, should I blog about this?" And she said, "Yeah, maybe. Why don't you give it a year or so and see where it goes?" And I was like, "Okay, that's probably a good idea," because I tend to rush at stuff and then overcommit quite zealously. So she basically said to me, "Hey, pop this on hold, and feel free to write the content, but don't publish it yet." So essentially on the 1st of January this year, so January 2020, I've started releasing blog posts that I've been writing mainly 6 to 9 months prior, some of them a couple of years, depending on where I've been on the journey. And there's some others that are just, just missed ideas and thoughts and stuff. So I've been, basically blogging through the entire thing, capturing thoughts, feelings, the horror of realizing that what I believed isn't actually real in my opinion anymore, and that my belief systems have changed. And so there's an entire host of blog content out there. I've got tons of posts ready to go, and basically I release one post every week on a Saturday morning, 9 a.m. here in the UK, and you can grab that all at the blog, which I'm sure we'll chat about later. And then this social media stuff. I just think it's really important to engage with people out there. And I'm regularly trying to share stuff on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, just the normal stuff to get to know people, to know what they're thinking, to share what other people are doing, to basically help others who were like me and like all of us, who were searching and asking questions, who might not have realized that there are people out there who've been on similar journeys, who have been in similar places, and actually we can help those starting off like you guys helped me. I hope one day I can help someone else who's going through this sort of stuff. I'm reading tons, like I said before, I'm reading both sides of the battle line, trying to make sure I understand what Christians are saying, and I understand what non-Christians are saying, and what other people are saying, whether it be like a secular politician or whatever on key issues of today, so that I can just talk about these things with my hat of kind of leadership within church and biblical studies as a degree, and then actually move that into really good, honest dialogue where I just share thoughts and feelings. And it's all my own stuff. Like, it's not me trying to straw man anyone. It's just me sharing what I think. So it very much is all personal. But I've been doing that for a while. And then the last few months, really, Dave and me have been working on a podcast. But I'll let Dave chat to us about that.
Okay, just drop me in. That's fine. I'm prepared.
You're welcome.
So because me and Sam worked together for a while. I remember, Sam, it was actually quite funny. It was on a lunch, wasn't it? We had a lunch once, and we just started chatting about some stuff. And it was there, like, I don't know actually how it happened, but basically it transpired that you didn't believe in Jesus anymore, and we work in a Christian workplace. That was fun. And you were like, so we sort of went from there. We started chatting more about it, didn't we? Because that was it. I said to you that I had all these questions, which I've just told you guys about, and then that just spied into, I don't think I believe this anymore. And so we thought it'd just be fun. We ended up sitting and having multiple lunches and spending hours chatting about all this sort of stuff. And we were like, we could just do this with a microphone, and it'd be quite fun to actually chat about certain subjects, tackle things that were fun to actually talk about. Because I know this is all very serious and it's got implications to lots of people, but I find this stuff just fun. Like, I find knowing what people think about stuff really interesting. I find people's opinions very interesting. I find how people can develop worldviews and have a stance on things. Then they don't necessarily know why they have that stance. Like, I find that stuff very interesting. So I thought, and Sam thought, having a podcast would be a good way of working this out, chatting through things, deciding what we think, journeying through that discussion on big key areas, things like the Bible, church, Christianity as a whole, key issues like, I don't know, we'd already said about money or women in the church, all these things. And so that's what we've started doing. We've started just recording, and then hopefully we're going to release that soon. We've got lots recorded and edited. We just need to actually get on with it and release it.
Anchor FM, that's the place you want to go. You can create an account, open up your podcast, start dropping in your episode. You can have your first episode up in 15 or 20 minutes and have it syndicated within 72 hours, and from then on, it is clear sailing. Anchor FM, if you want to start a podcast, that's really the place. I'll tell you, David. You said, "Thanks, Sam. Just drop me in." If you're going to podcast, that won't be the last time.
Oh no, Andrew and I are doing it to each other constantly.
Because sometimes your thoughts dead end, right? Sometimes someone needs to provide a little more salt in conversation. Sam, I'll tell you that honest conversation, it seems to me, and this is something that Matthew and I share, that's the thing people are starving for. We've got lots of people with loud voices in the room these days, right? There are lots of polarizing influences. And maybe right now, more than ever before in this generation, people want moderate voices. That's not that we're not going to watch our polarizing content, but I don't really think that is what people want. I think we're ready to move past that. We've had, in the United States, we've had 4 years of it. We've had 4 years of polarizing voices, 4 years of claims of fake news and the whole thing. And I think people are ready to make connections and to try to find the middle ground. And you've got the voice for it. You've got the right idea. Put out your content, guys, because this is what people want to hear. If the numbers we see mean anything, if the contacts we get mean anything, people want to hear honest, engaging conversation. And you don't even have to be a scholar. Right? It's not like you have to be, it's not like you have to have a PhD in theology or whatever, because most people don't live their lives that way, right? David, you were talking about middle-class values, right? We don't want necessarily people who are going to talk to us about the most traditional meaning of a Greek word. What we really want is to hear how people are getting on with their lives and making the best decisions they can make, and how we can all make better decisions, how we can all build a better community. And so Anchor FM, guys, Anchor.fm.
Have you chosen a platform yet?
We were looking at YouTube as well, actually. So trying to create it would just be like a static video, but then having that's quite a good way to one day potentially start doing live episodes. It's potentially, I'm going to kind of also thinking about doing, it's very American, but doing seasons. So having 20 episodes for season 1 and then season 2 starting a few months after that, and then actually also having a break to make sure that we have enough stuff to put out regular. So we're hoping it'd be similar to the blog, where it'd be 1 episode a week for 20 weeks, and then we'll have a pause as we get the next lot ready, and then get the next lot out there. So yeah, Anchor FM sounds good. I know a few people have mentioned SoundCloud as well and stuff, but yeah, I'll definitely take a look at that. That's really helpful. Thank you, Andrew.
Sure. The reason I mentioned Anchor, now I haven't used SoundCloud, and I know SoundCloud is highly thought of. The reason I mentioned Anchor, and I didn't intend to turn this into a how to start your own podcast episode, but Anchor, what they're good at is getting your content out to all of the major platforms after you get your account set up. So, Overcast and Spotify and iTunes and I don't know. There's a dozen others. Google's got its own syndication, and so what Anchor is good at is making sure that your episodes get into all of the feeds of the various podcatchers that people use. So whether you're a Spotify user or an Overcast user or Apple Podcast user. Matthew, what do you use? Do you use either of those?
I use Apple Podcasts.
You do?
I'm stubborn. I still call it iTunes. And the reason is because I have an iPod. So despite having nailed my wrist to the Bill Gates statue, when it comes to podcasts, I keep my podcasts separate to my smartphone. So I use my iPod for that. And I like having that separation. So if your podcast doesn't go out to iTunes, I'm not going to listen to it. It's that simple, mate. And
Anchor has some other benefits. They have really, really good statistics to help you understand what your demographics are down to gender and age, and what shows are performing well, all of that kind of thing. They have a a little built-in tool where when you publish your show notes, people can send you video messages. Send you audio messages as if they're leaving you a voicemail, so they don't have to, to log onto your website and leave feedback that way, or send feedback to some email like reasonpress@gmail.com in case anyone wants to feedback this episode, right? So they can simply touch a link in your show notes and leave you an audio message. And so pretty cool features there. And I'm not being paid to push Anchor FM. So the promo for Anchor stops here, but we have had good success with it. So anyway.
Yeah, we've had a good relationship we haven't had any major issues with Anchor really at all, have we? And it's been quite successful with us for 2 years now.
Yeah.
So, so for your new content, what made you want to do it together then, chaps?
Well, for me, it was because Dave has a really good understanding of the Bible. He understands theology. He understands the church here in the UK, and I think both of us being from the UK and having different stories. So me being raised in a very much a conservative Christian family and being a Christian since I can remember, to Dave becoming a Christian at 19, we just came from different places as well. So we have quite a good rapport, and just the conversations went well. Like we're just good friends, and we understand where each other are going to go and the sort of things we have on. And yeah, I think it's been a really natural progression in my mind. But Dave, feel free to tell me to sort off if that's wrong. We can do this separately if you want.
Oh, it's too late. You're bound now. I've been trying to get rid of Andrew for 18 months, and it just hasn't happened.
He's stuck.
Wow. Just, and you caught me totally flat-footed too. I have absolutely nothing to say. Nothing to say back to that, except maybe this. Now I know why we kicked you guys off this continent.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah. Choosing a partner who's from across the world might sound a little bit cute, so people can know who you are from your different accents. That might sound cute to start with, but it does have a sting in its tail. And the world digs the English accent, so giving everybody a double dose is obviously going to work for you too, I'm pretty sure.
I like that.
Yeah, it will work. By the way, I wouldn't, if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't choose a different podcast partner. So all kidding aside, Matthew, you're a great podcast partner. I wouldn't have a different one.
Oh, thank you. Now I have to say the same, and same to you, Andrew. Obviously, that's really. So, tell us about your brand, because you've told us what you're doing. You haven't plugged your brand. Do you please plug your brand if you're happy to do that? And where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. So the podcast, the website, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everything is just under the name When Belief Dies. So the easiest way to come across all of our stuff is just head over to whenbeliefdies.com. And there's on the top right on the header, there's loads of links to all the different stuff we're doing there. So yeah, come on over, check us out. Let us know what you think. Like we are looking for feedback. We're looking for engagement. We're looking for people, just as I mentioned, and you guys have mentioned, you just want honest conversations. You want to talk about where they are, and we're not going to try and push anything on anybody. We just want to hear people's stories. And to be completely honest, we're looking for Christians and non-Christians to come on the podcast. We can just ask them why they believe what they believe and the reasons behind where they are in their lives. And yeah, we just love that sort of stuff. So yeah, head on over to whenbeliefdies.com.
Excellent, thank you. And as I already said, I already follow you on social media. I followed your blog as soon as that started. And in fact, my blog, which tells my own story of my deconversion, is now, I barely touch it now. But I do have shared a few of your posts across to my blog, which is handy because we both do it on WordPress.
Yeah, works well.
And but the title that you've picked, When Belief Dies, there's a bit of finality about that phrase, that statement. Was that intentional? Are you fixed in your position?
That's a great question. I've had a lot of people either say they love it or hate it. It's definitely a Marmite name. I think for me, I realized quite early on in this journey that the conservative Christianity that I held has gone, and there is nothing I can do to get that back. So that belief has died. It has gone. I'm very happy to say that I'm on the journey still, which is the whole kind of agnostic atheist stuff I was talking about. And that I want to engage in honest dialogue. So when belief dies is essentially it is talking about that finality to my faith that I thought was going to see me through the rest of my life. It was the faith that I held, that I moved my wife and 2 kids to a new town to help a church plant out, to get involved with leadership. I went to Bible college. I worked in a Christian job. I led Bible studies, preached, all the stuff, and really believed that this was the bedrock to everything I had, and that fell through, it fell apart. And for me, that really was my belief dying. And obviously, when something dies, something new comes about. So I'm not saying that I don't have any belief now, but it's definitely coming off the back of that conservative Christianity having gone now.
You mentioned your parents and you're married. Are you prepared to talk about how your, I'm going to use the word deconversion, correct me if that's not the right word to use for you. How has that process you've gone through affected that relationship? Is that something you're prepared to talk about?
Yeah. So I'm happy to talk about both my family and my wife. My family, I think the biggest thing for them is the fear that I am going to hell. Talked about hell already, it's quite funny. And also the fear that because I have 2 young boys, so they're the only 2 young children in my kind of close family, that because I now no longer believe, that those 2 young boys might also now not believe, and that could mean that I go to hell with my children. It's like a generational thing. So my parents are definitely thinking about that, whether they haven't said that to me, but I know what I would have been like, so I know what they're being like. So that's quite an interesting take for me. I mean, they're very much hands off. They love me. They look after me. They talk to me. My 2 brothers are the same. I think if they know anything, they're just trying to stand back. And if I try and engage with them with anything, there's usually quite a lot of pushback. So I think it's just a case of these things aren't being spoken about. And then with my wife, my deconstruction, like both those words are fine, has caused a lot of issues to start with. Like it's been one of the hardest. It's been the hardest thing we've ever gone through. And I think what it's done now is it's meant that I am obviously far less opinionated and far less certain in my absolutes about things. So I think that's given my wife the space to also ask questions and to find her own faith. So she's a Christian, she's a believer. When we're allowed to go outside and see people, we're still going to church. As hard as that is, so I'm still going with her and supporting her there and stuff. But we're very much a case of our boys will make their own decisions in their own time, and they can ask questions. And she's even asking questions. What does she believe? Why does she believe it? Where's this going to go? I don't know. But it's really interesting to see her beginning to ask questions she probably would never have asked before, because I would have always been quite a loud voice within the relationship about faith due to my kind of leadership-y role within Christianity and church. It's definitely caused a lot of tension. I think the biggest moment for us was when I said that I'm mourning God. This was quite early on. I said, I'm mourning this God that I had, and she looked at me and said, I'm mourning you. And for me, that was a massive oh wow, I am not my belief in God, and that's taken a long time to work through. And it wasn't. I'm not angry at her or anything for saying that. I completely understand, but things like that crop up now and then, and it's just about us. Luckily, we're in a relationship, and Matt, you told me very, very early on, if you can, talk to your wife and tell her as soon as you can. And that was really helpful with me and her, because I think that's put us in a really good position to be able to have these honest, open dialogues where we can journey through the pain and the laughter and the joy as well, as those things come up together. So thank you for that as well, mate. I appreciate that.
I'm glad that's worked well for you, actually, certainly that talking, because I'm very open about it in my own journey. I did it the wrong way around. I wasn't open about my journey, and I didn't tell my wife until it was a done deal. And for the whole three years plus the extra padding on either side, she had no idea I was going through it. And it was a genuine shock for my wife. And I said, I'm sorry, it's a done deal. I'm atheist. I can't go back to a faith in God, not without something very, very significant happening and something very significant changing. And that blindsided her. That wasn't expected. I assumed that she'd worked out that there were issues there with my faith, but it completely took her by surprise, which that surprised me. But it causes issues. Talk about it, guys. If you're in a situation where you're in a relationship and you're having issues with doubts, please take Sam's path. My path of hiding it from your partner really isn't the right way to do it. I'm absolutely convinced that it causes more problems than it solves to wait until the end. I get why people do. It was fear that held me back, but it's going to come out. So you may as well do it sooner, because it hurts more the longer you wait. So just bloody well do it. David, you haven't said, are you a parent? Are you in a relationship? And how has this process for you affected that? Is that something you're prepared to answer?
Yeah, so I'm married. I've got two kids, two girls, 6 and 2. So relatively young family. My wife was not too impressed when I said that I wasn't sure what I believed anymore, which is fair. But I mean, the reason for that, and I think it's a justifiable reason, and I imagine that this is why this stuff is so significant and I suppose powerful, is that the bedrock of our relationship, where we met each other, our shared, a common thread for us, was our faith. I met my wife in church. We obviously got married in the church we met in. Like, we have always been to church together. And so for me to say, I'm not sure if I think this is real anymore, that's not just saying I'm not sure if I believe in a God or not. That is actually saying I'm not sure if the foundation of our relationship is true. So at least to her anyway. And so, yeah, I mean, it was, a shock is too strong a word. I think it raised a lot of questions, and her immediate response was I found it quite surprising, but I completely understand why, because of the thing I just said. Because, yeah, this is, like, that's the thing as well. Something like Christianity or any other faith, it is the bedrock of someone's life. I mean, even if someone doesn't truly believe it, like I've alluded to before, they still live their life based on the value. It's still the main thing they think about when they're making decisions. It's the main reason why they handle money in the way they do, or treat people the way they do, or form their relationships. And so if that is questioned, that is profound. So yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because, yeah, I have potentially pulled the rug out from under my wife's feet in regards to the foundation of our relationship. So yeah, I mean, that's how it's come from my end. And it does raise interesting things about kids. Like, well, if I'm not sure what I think anymore, do I still pray with my kids? Like, am I fine with that? Like, do I want them to go to church? If I was to lose all my faith, would I want my daughters to go to an organization which historically and still doesn't promote women? I know that is changing recently, but still, if you were to read the Bible, it doesn't have a great thing to say about women. So do I want my kids to be in that? Do I want one of the things I've noticed, sorry, I'm going a slight tangent, but it's still the same point, is there's more women than men in church. And the idea in church is that you shouldn't marry anybody outside of church circles. So am I happy for my girls to get deeply embedded in something which could leave them being single for their lives when they don't want to? They want to get married and have kids. So it raises loads more questions around how you should raise your children, because it's actually, while there is some good things, like Christianity and church, there's great things, community, good values, treating other people above yourself. These are amazing things. But there's also a lot of baggage that goes with that community. There's a lot of expectation placed on people. There's a lot of guilt and shame and condemnation placed on people for the way they live their lives. So, do I want my kids to be involved in that? So, yeah, that's where I stand at the moment. It's a whole host, a forest of questions is the term me and Sam sometimes use.
Dave, one of the things that I found to be a problem when I was leaving Christianity was there is this value proposition, right? That you share this common thread about faith in God. And with that comes a whole raft of other things that seem to be pretty helpful, right? So we both love God together, and God loves us individually, and we can love each other because we're both saved. And the story goes on and on. It was a problem for me when I walked away from Christianity to have to replace all of those ideas. I know you're not at a point where you're saying you're walking away from Christianity, and that is not, I'm not trying to pin that to you. But you do have to solve each step away that you take, each brick that is important to that structure that is eliminated. You have to replace that value with something. And so I will just tell you that from this side of the line today, the thing that I am most proud of is that I can look at my girlfriend and tell her that I love her not because we have a shared interest in God or that God taught us to love or wrap the Christian value proposition however you want. The thing that I appreciate most about being on this side of the line is being able to say to her, I love you for you, I love you because I can. And I don't have to have an intermediary. So if I find out tomorrow that there is a God, I will love you. If I find out that there's if I find out that Vishnu is real, I will love you. But I don't need a God to love you. And so, I guess what I'm saying is, don't let the lack of a Christian value proposition be the thing that she sees that takes value out of the relationship. We don't need religious value propositions to care for each other. We do that as human animals. We're social creatures. And so while it's probably true that people would complain that what I'm saying is now we're just a bag of chemicals doing what bags of chemicals do, and they'd be incredibly reductionist about it. The secular value proposition is that we appreciate each other because we are of a kind, and because we suffer the same things, and because we want largely the same things. And you don't need a Christian value proposition. And maybe it would be helpful to her to hear, I love you because I'm me and I love you, and I don't need anyone else to sign off on that.
I want to, so if I could be permitted to ask you both a straightforward question then, in terms of where you are and what you're doing. How do your respective partners feel then about you getting involved in what's borderline active atheism, which potentially brings other people out of the church? Is it difficult for your partners to support you doing that? Are they seeing it as a hobby? How is that working?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, I think, speaking for her, so I'd probably be wrong, but I think the way that we're viewing it very much is that I am telling my story and I am engaging with other people's stories. And I think the reality is we don't have the power to control what does and does not convince us is true. And I think it's important for people to not therefore hide behind doors or walls or windows or whatever barrier you want to put in place because they're scared about asking questions and digging into stuff for fear that they might find something that convinces them that the belief system they hold is not true. And I think that's, a respectable position that my wife, is okay with. So for our kids, for example, like I want them to be skeptical and critical. And I chatted this briefly with David, the Graceful Atheist, who does a great podcast, and we're talking about how he is very much a case with his kids. They'll watch an advert, and on the advert they will talk about it skeptically and to say, what's the advert trying to sell to us? How's it doing it? Why is it doing it? And teaching those sort of skills is really important. I think that's a really important part to so for me, it's very much about that, having those conversations and allowing other people to have those conversations and reflect and recognizing that a lot of people don't change their mind in the moment, and people need time to go away and think about it. So I think my wife is quite happy that people are having the conversations, but probably because she's not as convinced as she once was about things like heaven and hell. I think if you're very, as Dave mentioned right at the start, really pious about heaven and hell, and you would want to pull people away from that bus, right? You wouldn't want them to get run over. You'd want to get them out of the way. So I can imagine someone who was believing that heaven and hell are literal places that we're definitely going to, they'd be worried that things we're doing are bringing people to hell, but I don't think that's true. I think God has the power to know if he's real. He's got the power to know what will and will not convince somebody of his reality, and he can do that at any moment he chooses to. He knows exactly what will change my mind this instant. And I think the only way for me to push these doors is to ask these questions, and I want to do that with people. It's pointless doing it alone. So that's my 2-minute answer. There you go.
My wife finds it quite hard that I'm doing this, and she isn't the biggest fan. But the reason is, and I think this would apply to lots of people who aren't Christians, not just my wife, is because she sees, and this is actually one of the reasons I have lots of doubts as well, and I'll explain why. So she sees intellectualizing God as the wrong way of finding God. Does that make sense? So she's very very emotional feeling that sort of leads you to God, because God isn't about thinking about him, like rationalizing him. It is about experiencing him, which is a very common thing you hear in church circles. So that means that for her, this isn't actually going to help. This is only going to push me further away. So she finds that really hard. But in turn, that is one of the reasons that I find Christianity quite challenging, because all the people I know personally who intellectually try to look at Christianity end up moving further away from Christianity. And I would expect, if God is God, who therefore has made everyone individually, etc., then surely intellectual consideration of God should lead you to God. God, if he's all powerful, knowing everything, then he shouldn't just attract people to him through feelings or emotions. You should be able to consider, think, rationalize, approach God through something which, again, if God has created you to be intellectually minded, that should lead you to God, shouldn't it? So I think she finds the podcast idea very difficult because it is, in her view, not the right way to approach God. And so I'm not actually going to find God doing this. I'm going to get further away, is the way she sees it.
Would she agree that it is possible to take any position on faith or on emotion? I mean, would she agree in other normal circumstances where you're not talking about Christianity, that emotions are a bad way to make decisions, to come to conclusions?
I imagine she would. The analogy, which I haven't used yet, because I don't want to sit and argue with my wife about this. It doesn't help anyone.
No, of course not.
But analogy, I'm not sure if you guys do this. I know loads of other people do. Like, you have sort of like debates in your head with the person you're going to speak to in your head. Like, you go back and forward about what the conversation would be like. And I've always thought a reasonably good analogy of what you're saying there is people who remain in like abusive relationships. There's lots of reasons, but sometimes the reason they stay in those relationships is because they believe the person still loves them or they still love the person. So the irrationality is based on emotional and feeling connections to something which, if you stood outside and rationalized it, you'd be like, well, this is flipping stupid, I need to bail. So I would agree. You wouldn't apply that logic to plenty of situations, but you do, not just my wife, that is a very common thing in Christianity, is to apply logic to the situation that you wouldn't apply to anything else in your life. So yeah, I do agree that it is something that you wouldn't do elsewhere.
Don't take podcast. Did this just recently. It sort of blew up in my face. Don't take podcast argumentation to your significant other. She's very likely to tell you, don't talk to me about that crap.
I have a very forthright wife, which does me lots of good, but it's not something we would do.
There's also, see this with Christians, there's a sort of sunk cost fallacy. My parents and their parents believed, I'm a Christian because I come from a long line of Christians. This is just what we do, sort of the sunk cost fallacy. And, what am I going to do if I'm no longer a Christian? So that thing I just said to you was one of my big ways out. It's one of those things that really lights the path. I could take any position on faith. If I grew up in Egypt, I would probably be Muslim. If I grew up in certain parts of India, Hindu or Buddhist. I grew up in the Southeast U.S. My parents are Southern Baptist. I was Church of Christ. And so it just seems that faith is a lot less about an actual God and a lot more about where you come from. And that's hard to grapple with. It's hard to think, if I was born somewhere else, I probably wouldn't have these beliefs. I might be equally committed to whatever beliefs I had, but I probably wouldn't be a Christian. And so if that's the best reasoning you have, if it's the Hebrews 11 kind of faith, the hope of things unseen, it just seems to be a pretty weak way to make a decision. I came at this because I have faith. I have faith in anything.
I think your wife and my wife will get on very well, David. My wife's very much the same. She feels that the relationship with God is much more of an emotional thing, and the idea of overly intellectualizing the God concept doesn't make a lot of sense to her. And for those who have listened to the Jonathan McClatchy episode that we recently recorded, the question right at the end is the question that came from my wife, which was, and I'll summarize, if you took away the philosophical arguments for God, would you still believe in the truth of the resurrection? And Jonathan's answer was no, it wouldn't. And then he went on to explain why that's his case. So for him, it was important that he can rationalize it as well. And him replying in the negative surprised my wife. She thought, well, why do you need to? It's surely the emotional side is good enough. So people clearly approach the idea of God from different perspectives according to what works best for them. And I think what your wife's position is not an unusual position. So you mentioned podcast. The blog When Belief Dies has been going for a few months. When are you launching the podcast formally? Or have you not got a date for that yet?
That's a damn question. Sam, what do you think?
That's the... Oh, damn it, Dave, I was about to wrap you in. Yeah, we're doing it tonight. Good luck, Dave. We are going to hopefully be releasing... it's frantically trying to upload right now. We hopefully going to be releasing, I would reckon, early summer, June, July sort of time. Everything's pretty much ready to rock and roll. I mean, we could literally be kicking it out now, which is mid-May, but yeah, likely to be early June, I think, is probably quite a realistic goal. What do you think, Dave?
Yes, we've as I said before, we've got plenty recorded.
Yes.
Yeah, so was that tomorrow then, Sam? Is that what we said? But no, seriously, we've got several fully edited and done.
Yeah, sure, let's do that.
Got a load more recorded. It's just making sure they're all. I'm a bit of a pedantic perfectionist, so I'm really fussy, and so I need to just get on and say it's fine rather than being annoyed about every little bug and blip and and ah. So yeah, next month or so I think is quite realistic.
Yeah, and it should be fair to say that it's essentially Dave's the one doing all the editing. He's the one putting music in all the cuts. He's the one recording everything. So he's the one basically smashing it. I just rock up, say some stuff, and then sod off. And I'll probably do a bit of social media when it goes live. But yeah, he's the one that's putting in the hours, and I'm focusing more on the blog side. So hats off to Dave for all his new skills that he's now got. It's exciting.
Excellent. And it does take hours, doesn't it? It might only take a couple of hours to set up, record an episode and wrap up, but then the effort to go in and clean that up, top and tail it, sort out the bits, edit things, insert bits if you want to, that can take 5 times as long, can't it?
It certainly can. And when you start recognizing an by the shape of its sound recording rather than the sound itself.
Yes, I am so there already. I am so there.
You realize
I can actually describe it. It's
different people do it differently. Oh, I've noticed there's some people who draw breath after the or after the and there are some people who do it before. Things like that.
Yeah.
So,
good fun.
So you're an Audacity user, Dave, or are you using?
Yes, I use Audacity only because I literally Googled free software to edit podcasts in. It was
and
like
Audacity came up. Yeah.
It's a very, very good tool. It really is, guys. If you're thinking about this kind of thing, listeners, Audacity's the one. Download it. Pay a donation to the author. He definitely deserves it. I really like the tool. And some of its sound cleaning up stuff is quite good as well. It saved a couple of atrocious audio clips for me when in the early days of the editing.
Yeah, it's good. It's good program, easy to use. So yeah, it's stellar.
Absolutely, Sam. You were on Dave the Graceful Atheist podcast. Awesome podcast. I do love the podcast. That's 3 out of 4 that's been on the Graceful Atheist on this little gang. I highly recommend the podcast. I think Dave runs a really good podcast there. When are we going to hear you on it, David?
He actually asked if I wanted to go on it, and I haven't given it a second thought. Not in any mean way. I just my life is very busy. Who knows? If he wants me to go on and ramble about what I think, then I will. Though I feel like I like the sound of my voice too much anyway. So being on yet another podcast probably won't do my ego any good.
You need to have a little bit of ego to do so. But yeah, maybe waiting a year and seeing where your journey goes might be the more wise thing to do in terms of that respect. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with making that decision.
David, I wonder if is there something that would repair your faith? Would send you back to church? And so I'm trying to be very careful about not presuming exactly where you are, right? So I don't want to over ask, but you're not in the same place that you were 2 or 3 years ago. So is there something that you can identify that would move you back to that place from where you are today?
It is a very good question. I think it wouldn't just be a one thing. I think it'd be a combination. The first thing would be meeting someone who truly believed, and that links back to what I said before. Someone who actually takes the teaching of Jesus and really lives them. Obviously not perfect. I'm not expecting someone to be an utterly perfect Christian, but someone who actually lives self-sacrificially, and to like the extent that is described in the Gospels. You know how Jesus models being abused for the sake of the kingdom of God and to the point of death. Like that is his model through both his words and his deeds, as according to the Gospels. And his if you read all his teachings, it's like lay everything down. So I met someone truly like that, who the kingdom of God was such a real thing to them that they could lay everything down for it. I know those people do exist in the world. There are some, but I haven't actually met anyone. So that would be one thing, is meeting someone whose faith is so profound that it means everything to them, and not just a bit of a lifestyle or a friendship group or a social setting. So that's one thing. And the second thing would be genuine, either seeing or experiencing a genuine answer to prayer. Not it could be Jesus, or it could be God, or it actually could just be this, that, and the other. Something that you can actually go, oh, hang on, that was no other explanation than God. So, I mean, me and Sam have spoken about this. When you see healings, or you don't see healings, there's loads of documentaries on this, etc. It's like, oh, someone's headache got better, or a back complaint isn't as bad, or the knee doesn't hurt as much. But you never hear things of someone's eyes grew back, or their leg grew back, or like someone who was genuinely brain dead could now get up and walk. Like all the miracles in quotes are very like superficial. So for me, like actually meeting someone who, or seeing like that's a genuine miracle. That isn't just like these superficial emotional hype based events. So I think it's those two things. But the main one for me is not even the miracle thing, is a minor thing. I think it's actually seeing people or someone, or meeting a group who is genuinely real. It's not you see what I mean? There's a depth to it that's beyond just it's just a social setting or a nice thing to think, or it's a background, like you said. I've been raised a Christian, my parents are Christian, I'm in a Christian country. Yeah, something beyond that. That's what I think it would take to really knock me back on track. Because at the moment, I am asking all these questions that I've just said then, but I'm not seeing the answers which I would hope to have seen.
I agree about the miracle. You guys, Sam, I don't know if you know. David, you certainly don't. I've got one eye. I've got a prosthetic. My left eye is a prosthetic from a childhood disease. And I have often said, just about everywhere this comes up, if you know a faith healer that can really regrow this eye that I'm missing, I will go anywhere, pray any prayer, participate in any ceremony, enact any ritual, read any books. I will do whatever it takes. That, for me, and it wouldn't even necessarily mean that the God was real, right? It could be a trickster God. It could be, it wouldn't necessarily be the God of the devotee, but that would get me started. That would be a way for me to say there's something here that really deserves my attention. And so anyway, in that way, we're in lockstep. I don't think, Christianity is under-demonstrated, or at least the claims are. And that also puts me in a place where I have to ask, what does it mean to live forever? Is there a God that can do that? Is there a God that can rightly divide the just from the unjust? Does he have an eternal torture chamber? Does he have the right to make ethical judgments about all of these things are central claims of Christianity that we don't get to just because some guy could turn water into wine, right? So I don't actually think any of those miracles ever actually happened, but even if they did, it doesn't get us the central claims of Christianity. So I'm with you. Let's get a real act of God that is unmistakable. Then we've got a different conversation. But I still don't know if it gets me to Christianity. It doesn't answer the other questions. The ability to give me an eye doesn't mean that you're all just or that you can live forever. Anyway, my 2 cents.
I like your answer, David, and it's pretty much the same answer that I would give, which is interesting. Sam, are you going to sail any differently?
No, I think, I mean, I say on my blog, don't know if everything's been published yet, but basically, I think something that would convince me and would convince the world that Christianity is true. Say that every single person out there who has cancer, they walked into a church and they were instantly healed. You would see the entire world turn around. There's so many things that could happen that would mean that people will have the ability to believe in God. And I think that's a big thing for me is seeing something like that would not only help me believe, but would help the whole world believe. And if God is God and He is all powerful, and he would be able to literally write on all of our hearts that He is real, and also literally give us free will. It wouldn't be an either or. It wouldn't be this sort of thing where for some people He'll show Himself in this sort of like miraculous way, like Paul or Moses or Abraham or whoever. He would be able to show all of us that He's literally there, but we'd still all be able to have the free choice to accept Him or reject Him. Like, that's the kind of fundamental claim of Christianity. But obviously that isn't true. He doesn't literally tell us He's there. We have to piece together stuff that for most of us hasn't been able to be pieced together. So those sort of things would really help. People walking into a church and something massive happening because you inside a church and God is there, or with His people or whatever. But basically people invoking the Christian Yahweh God, the Judeo-Christian God, and then something happening, and that consistently happening would help me to really go, oh yeah, okay, this is actually something real.
Has parenthood changed how you view the God relationship at all, either of you?
Go, Dave.
100%. One of the questions on the idea of hell. We keep going back to hell. Like, I'm generally not that interested in it for some reason. I spoke about it like 4 times. But one of the first, I realised I've said 3 different versions of the first question I had about faith. But one of the many was the idea of hell. Once I had kids, it wouldn't matter what my children did. I wouldn't be able to. The equivalent of hell made me feel sick. Because my daughter, I can't think of anything that she could do which would lead me to punish her forever. Obviously, children misbehave. You need to discipline them and teach them how to be actual people, because keeping children alive is easy. Like, raising people is hard. And so, but I was thinking, there's nothing she could do which would make me present the equivalent of hell. And I was like, how does that work then? Because if we're all God's children, how can He send people to hell? Like, I know, again, the whole debate what hell is, I get it. But that was another question. Having kids made me go, how does that work if the concept of us being children of God works? Like, how could that be a thing?
Yeah. Once again, you've elucidated exactly my answer, David. Thank you for that. And I'm exactly where you are with that very same thing. And I'm not conscious that parenthood changed me. My daughter was very young when I started my process, still in single digit years. And I'm not conscious that being a new parent affected my exits in any way. I always say it was the science that got me out, but it's very possible that that father-daughter relationship and having a child that I was responsible for and I was expected to act responsibly for affected how I viewed the parent-like picture that Christianity tells us that God is. Maybe it did, because I view it exactly the same way you did. Sam, are you any different?
I think one of the big things that caused me a lot of issues when I was leaving the faith was the idea of purpose or worth associated with people. And I think, I for a long time looked at my 2 little boys. So I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and was saying, they are worth something. And because I was trying to disattach my worth from the belief system I held, I was then trying to work out what, obviously I believe they have worth, but work out where that worth then sat if Christianity wasn't true. That was a hard thing to kind of get to a point where I'm able to understand that. I mean, my view that they had worth never changed. I'm not saying I decided that they didn't have worth now. I was definitely stuck there for a little while going, well, I need to believe Christianity is true because I need this worth to be rooted within something, and it must be Christianity. That really caught me for a while, oddly. I'm not quite sure why. I think a lot of people push back on that for me at the moment, saying if stuff like free will and objective morality aren't true and stuff, then, how can you say that you actually love somebody or all this sort of stuff, which I really don't need to go into here, but it's definitely, for me, took a little while to work through. But I think that's important, isn't it? These journeys are all different for everybody, and the things that stump one person won't stump someone else, and that's why these conversations are important. It's important to help each other work things through and to have someone else to bounce ideas off, because we're all going to find those moments where we get stuck and we need someone to help us.
Thank you. Andrew, your thoughts on that option?
I raised stepchildren before my daughter, and I raised them in what I now recognize was a cult. That's the Church of Christ in the United States. Dave, you mentioned earlier on that Christianity is not particularly good to women. I will just say that they are deserved my eternal apology for raising them in what I now know was a Christian cult. When I look at my daughter today, I cannot imagine raising her in Christianity, treating her as a second-class citizen and impressing on her that she should somehow be subservient. It is appalling to me what we have done, not just to a generation of women, but to generations as far back as we can see. And what the data tells us today is as women gain more equality, our societies get better. And so that to me is a big condemnation of Christianity. But it's worse than that in the United States. You guys may be aware that there's a big fight about the Equal Rights Amendment. So for our listeners who aren't in the United States, the Equal Rights Amendment was proposed back in the early 70s. It was to give women equal rights. Today, in the United States, right now, we are still fighting to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. As it turns out, we needed a 66%. We needed a 2/3 majority out of the states to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. In 2019, the state of Virginia finally adopted the Equal Rights Amendment. We were on the cusp of granting equal rights to the other half of all humans that live in the United States. The Trump Justice Department has blocked the Archivist of the United States from adding the Equal Rights Amendment to the amendments of the Constitution of the United States. So when I walked out of Christianity, I was able to see this thing more clearly, to see it for what it was, that I would have said no to the Equal Rights Amendment as a Christian because the Bible didn't treat women particularly well. They were second-class citizens. And if any of us have ever pushed that view on a woman in our lives or a young girl, find them and apologize. Christianity should be condemned on the grounds that it doesn't treat everyone equally.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing the differences between the US and the UK. I mean, obviously things are very, very similar, but there are definitely some differences, I think, I hope. What's your kind of interpretation of how things are on this side of the pond?
Oh, so, I think if I had been a Christian in the United Kingdom, or indeed in most places in the European Union, I might have been a Christian longer. Because you guys definitely have a more tolerable Christianity, one that I think, I could have worked with the part of my personality that wants social equality, right, and still have maintained my Christianity. But I really don't think that's possible in the conservative denominations in the United States. Now, certainly the Presbyterians, the more liberal Methodists, some strains of Catholics, though not all of them. You guys are much more progressive about Christianity than we are. And I find UK Christians much more tolerable as a result. But if you're still having to acknowledge, if you can look around the UK and say, look, Christianity still doesn't allow us to treat half of the human population as equal. Can't we just burn the books and call it a day? Matthew, is that you?
Yeah, I was thinking book burning. That's an incendious phrase, isn't it?
As me being incendiary, yes. So, yes, sorry for the long speech about women and equality. It is a big issue here right now. And the people who are fighting against equal rights are the Christians, the Trump supporters, the people that put him in office. Those people are the ones that are saying women don't deserve equal rights. Frankly, I expect better out of the human race than that.
It's been great chatting to you guys. Looking forward to the podcast coming up. It'll be nice to hear another set of friendly voices. We've got a nice little group of podcasts talking about the subject that I listen to. So it'll be nice to hear your guys' voices. So yeah, whenever it happens, it will happen, and I'm looking forward to that.
Let us know so we can push your podcast.
Yes, do that.
We'll do, for sure. Yeah,
well,
thank you.
You might want to listen to it first, though, to make sure it's actually worth pushing.
Well, well, you're over here. You can't do it. It's not like you're going to do worse. So
yeah, it's quite, you haven't heard or you clearly haven't listened to all the podcasts that we plug anyway. So
yeah, look, dude, we're setting the bar low, like on the floor low. So you can't do worse. No, seriously, let us know. You guys are cool. You're going to have interesting conversations, and we want to push the property. We want to tell people about you, and maybe we can get together in the future, do some shared projects. Matthew has got us in a really interesting project right now. Matthew, do you want to talk about it a little bit as we shut this thing down?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Let's do that. I mean, I flagged it up briefly for the last episode that we did, but Andrew and I are participating in the Alpha course. For those that don't know, as part of lockdown here in the UK, Holy Trinity Brompton, which is the church from which Alpha course originates, are doing Alpha online. So we're doing Alpha via Zoom to thousands of people, not just in the UK, but across the world. So Andrew and I are both participating in that, and we're going to do a bit of review on the Alpha course, some of our thoughts. There's one other person who I'm trying to said he'll go and do it on it. As far as I'm aware, he hasn't been allocated a week one yet on the Alpha course, so I'm waiting for that to kick off, and then he'll come on and join us, and we'll start talking about it. And I believe there's a couple of others who are prepared to talk about it but are not on any courses. So this is another call to any listeners, including you two, Sam and David. If anyone is taking part in Alpha Online, please get in touch. Let's see if we can get some thoughts and experiences on that. I don't mind what side of the fence you're on. This isn't just intended to be an invitation to bash something that's Christian. Let's try and talk about it with a little bit more decorum than that. So that's what we're going to do. So look out for something on that coming on. We don't know how many episodes we're going to do on that. I don't think it'll be one per week, because that'll be 11 episodes, which will take us probably through a whole calendar year. So, but that's what we're working on at the moment. Have either of you two done Alpha course? Do you have any thoughts on Alpha course without giving any spoilers for what we're going to do?
I've run part of an Alpha course before and been on one, so yeah, I know quite a lot about them. They're interesting. They're very interesting. I went to two quite recently at the church that I was part of a few months ago, before all the lockdown stuff in the winter, and it was really interesting sitting in it and now on the other side, watching the videos and stuff. So I'd be fascinated to hear how you guys take it and what your thoughts are and stuff. That'd be really interesting.
Excellent. In that case, we should get you back on when we've done a couple of episodes, get you on, and you can give some of your thoughts and compare them with what we're putting out. Yeah, what about you, David?
I seem to remember helping run one many years ago, but the memory's so hazy I can't remember much about it. But me and Sam actually chatted about that as a concept would be quite fun to go with a slightly different mindset, to ask some questions, because I would be interested to know what the answers would be to some more in-depth questions or more challenging ones than they may normally get. So I imagine it would be quite fun.
It's definitely interesting. I will throw one thing out, because we have heard that there's been from some of the Christian sources that we listen to, specifically the Unbelievable podcast, but it's not the only one that's pushed this out, that there's been a renewed interest in Christianity in this lockdown period, and of course has reported record numbers. I'm not disputing those claims, but to try to put them in a bit of context, on my course of a dozen, there's only 2 of us who are expressing any doubts to Christianity. Everybody else is saying that they are already in a position of faith. So that's the context in which I'm seeing the claims of renewed interest in alpha. I don't think there's a lot of it. This interest and stuff is necessarily coming from people who don't already have an investment in Christianity. That's my assumption on these numbers.
It wouldn't surprise me. You only have to look at stats and figures, and church attendance in the UK has declined steadily for, 100 plus years. So it cannot be possible that churches are growing yet attendance is declining. There must be something else there. So it wouldn't surprise me if the majority of people are just people who were in church, left, and come back again. I would love to know behind the scenes and the figures on this. I mean, my job is data analyst, so I have now become more and more cynical about figures that are presented, not just by church, just by everyone, but it made me want to ask more questions about those figures. And how do you know the attendance, as you said, are people who are actually seeking faith, or who are already Christians who don't know, or new Christians who want to find out more? Do they actually break that down into more detailed and thorough numbers? I'd be interested to know.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think that's very important. It's all well and good throwing out the headline number, but it's the data behind the number that's really important. Andrew and I were talking as just to give you an idea of context. Andrew and I were talking before we came online about coronavirus deaths here in the UK, and over the weekend they announced that 25% of the coronavirus deaths in the UK are linked to type 1 diabetes. When you take that in context of 8% of the population are type 1, there's clearly a big difference between those numbers there, so that needs to be looked at. But you're right, that as a headline figure can be quite scary, but what is it that makes it up? Is there something else going on there? What's the demographics going on there? There's much more to that number to make it meaningful than just throwing out those two numbers. And crunching data is really important. Maybe there's a show that we can do there on proscenium. And maybe we need to put that down in our notes, Andrew, and see if we can get David and maybe somebody else to talk about the importance of properly analysing data and not just throwing out the big numbers.
I'd like to talk about that because it seems to me that the big issue and the problem with making proclamations about the Alpha Course right now is we have no idea what physical church attendance is going to look like after the coronavirus pandemic is pretty well sorted out, right? We've got vaccinations, and most people have had the vaccinations, and so there's not fear, right? We're ready to go back to public spaces as we did in 2019, right? At the end of 2019, we didn't know anything about, call it the summer of 2019. So we're vacationing, we're going to hotels, we're happy in restaurants and grocery stores and in church. And we're not going to know the impact of coronavirus until the wave has passed and everyone is comfortable going back out in public. That won't be this year. It may not be next year. But that's when we're going to know whether this sort of global pandemic causes people to turn to faith or away. At least that's my thought on it. David, you're a data analyst. You may have a different and better perspective, but that's where I am at the moment.
Oh, yeah, definitely fully agree. Yeah, we won't know for a while, will we? It's one of those things that you have to look over a long term, wouldn't you, to see if this apparent increase actually pans out for anything over time, wouldn't you? Because just a couple of months blip is kind of irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, isn't it? So, I mean, obviously you had a couple of months blip in toilet roll sales. That doesn't mean you're going to get any toilet roll sales, is it? So.
Matthew, you can cut out everything I said, and you can just leave that.
We went from alpha to toilet rolls in 4 smooth steps. Right. That
was great.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to have to label this Fireside Chat because I think that's probably an appropriate description for what we've had. Thank you both. It's been brilliant having having you on, chatting to you, talking around things. I've learned something. I've got a bit of a picture of your place. Sam, I enjoy your writing. Carry on doing the blog. I enjoy your book reviews. Please carry on doing those. You have a great voice with a British accent, with a slightly bit of a northern accent to it. Can't wait to hear your podcasts. I'm sure it's going to be as good as your book reviews and your blog. Genuinely all the best to you guys. Let us know as soon as the first one goes live, and we'll make sure that we announce it on the next episodes that we do. Listen to the other podcasts that we push out, guys. There's Dave the Graceful Atheist. I absolutely adore his podcast. He's been with us for a couple of times. I'm sure we'll do it again. There's the Mind Shift podcast with Clint Haycott. I really like his. He's in the UK, but he talks with an American accent. Get your head around that. He's a great podcast. There's Skeptics and Seekers, and well, that's a bun fight every time we get going on there. We're recording a new Skeptics and Seekers episode over the weekend, aren't we, Andrew? Talking about can we plug that project that we've just been involved in? We shouldn't we? You do that.
Yes. Okay.
And take us out on that.
Okay. When the coronavirus pandemic hit, David Johnson, who is one of the authors of Still Unbelievable, in fact, he wrote several chapters, decided that he wanted to create a coronavirus project, a way to make a book, have people donate, and have the proceeds from the book given to frontline responders. I think the proceeds are going to the American Red Cross. So what David ended up doing was gathering a group of relatively well-known Christians and atheists. Matthew and I also contributed chapters, not that we're very well known, but Justin Brierley has written a chapter for the book. Randall Rouser's written a chapter for the book. And that book is out now. That book is available today. I think it went live the day before yesterday. And that book is available at skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. The conceit of the book is that the various voices, skeptics and Christians, talk about how coronavirus has strengthened or changed their worldviews. I've read the book, and it's definitely worth a read. Most especially if you're on the fence about a worldview. If you have questions and you want to sort of measure those questions in your life against what other people are thinking, these are the voices. These are the voices of the coronavirus. Go and read the book. skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. If you have any feedback for us, by all means, send us an email, drop us a line at reasonpress@gmail.com, or you can click on the link in the show notes, leave us a voice message. And Sam, Dave, thank you. Let us know when your first show goes live. We want to push your show. And thanks for being with us. Matthew, as always, you're awesome.
And
thank you for joining.
Thank you, chaps. That's been great.
Yeah, good to speak to you.
Thank you.
You have been listening to a podcast by Reason Press. To get in touch, email reasonpress@gmail.com or see our website, reasonpress.net, where you'll also find our book, Still Unbelievable. We welcome more feedback, and you might even end up on an episode. Our theme music was written for us by Holly. You can hear more of her music at soundcloud.com/hollybishop. You can support us by buying some of Holly's music and telling her we sent you.